Hi, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. In today's video, we're going to be talking about healing and spiritual lies. Now, healing in this context, and if you're at all familiar with my work, you know that my main focus is complex chronic inflammatory conditions like fibromyalgia, Lyme disease, mold exposure, chronic fatigue syndrome, adrenal fatigue, reactivated Epstein-Barr, long haulers, candida, anything autoimmune. There is a whole pile of conditions that are all getting new names all the time, because it's a problem that's unsolved. We keep renaming it, but it's basically the same problem. So we look at this in this ecosystem I've created. Our job is to examine this problem of complex chronic inflammatory conditions from all different angles so that you can get clarity and start healing for real instead of just chasing around the dragon of symptoms, right? So in today's video, we're gonna be looking at spiritual lies, and I'm gonna explain more about what I mean so that you can start to recognize the nature of advice, the nature of recommendations, the nature of suggestions, especially as it comes to healing, but this will apply to life in general, right? There's like a spiritual lesson here that I got from one of my mentors that I think is pretty cool and worth passing on. But the main focus here is to take this kind of truth, if you want to call it that, and apply it to healing so you can start to get out from under some of these lies, whether they're intentional or not. All right, let's get started. Yeah, lying is such a charged word, right? A lot of times people are lying and they don't know it. It's just a factor of ignorance. We just don't know what we don't know. I fall into this too, by the way. There is a sphere of understanding where I live, and then there's a lot of stuff outside of that. But I'm aware of that. You have to be aware of that so that you don't get caught in all these weird kind of spiritual trappings, right? Because the more evolved we think we are, then the less we think we make mistakes. But in reality, we need to always be looking at ourselves and our own outlook. So there's this story about lies that I learned from one of my mentors, and I definitely think it's worth passing on here. And it has to do with lies sometimes being intentional, sometimes being unintentional, but even when they're intentional, it doesn't mean they're malicious. Actually, a lot of times people can be lying with the best of intentions, with the best of reasons. You don't believe me? Think about like a little white lie, right? You know, how does my new haircut look? Looks great, you know, just a little something like that. Those things are okay in some situations, right? So the story I learned from my mentor, he was off in Asia at a temple, and it was, I believe it was like a Buddhist temple or a Taoist temple, very old temple. And they had all these scrolls. You know, it was like a library, right? They had all these scrolls collected and saved up on the shelves. And this monk who was working at the temple, they were a translator there. And the monk came and he told my teacher, he said, he gestured at all the scrolls and all the spiritual teachings, right? He gestured at them and he said, these are all lies, right? That's how it came through the translation. And my teacher was like, huh? You know, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Is this a mistranslation thing? And so they got into the lying of it, right? And like I said, sometimes lies are well-intentioned, right? But what this monk's main point was, after I think a long conversation from the sounds of things, but the main point distilled down to all these spiritual teachings that have been written down, right? None of them are absolute truth. Instead of being absolute truth that everybody should follow and everybody should strive towards universally, they're actually a lot of little ingredients, right? Little knowledge ingredients, little perspective ingredients that people can take to offset an imbalanced thought pattern, right? So if you're walking around with a limited worldview or some kind of archetype you're playing or whatever it is, right? Wherever you're out of balance in terms of your spiritual development or your mindset, then there's some little quote or aphorism, right? Or some piece of advice that's in one of these scrolls that's part of a wisdom tradition that a monk could say to you, right? To help give you something to rebalance yourself. So for example, what do I mean by that? Well, if somebody was already very selfish and kind of a withdrawn person, right? And they didn't like other people, maybe that there's an imbalance there. So maybe the advice would be, oh, you should also think of others, right? Think of other people and be more generous and try to spend time connecting because you're a little top heavy in one direction, right? That would be the advice. However, if somebody came with life questions or they're feeling out of balance and they were already somebody who was gregarious and social and took care of people a lot, right? But maybe their imbalance is somewhere else, like they don't have good self-care, right? They don't prioritize their own selves. They're too busy helping everybody else. But the spiritual advice, if it was the same, right? Well, think more of other people. That same cure for the person who was withdrawn, right? That medicinal advice could cure that person basically, right? That same cure becomes a poison when given to somebody with an entirely opposite constitution or entirely opposite pattern presentation, right? So all these things, all these pieces of wisdom, time-tested, written down on the scrolls, right? Very dusty, very ancient, right? Very wise. They're all lies, right? Meaning they're only true relative to how much that person needs to hear that particular piece of wisdom to rebalance their perspective. Because that's the idea, is we're all kind of slowly working our way towards some kind of personal truth that then aligns to a more universal truth, right? Where we start to find this very clean way of living and balance our psyche and become enlightened, right? If that's your goal, something like that, at least as I understand it. And then eventually we probably escape the mind entirely and go to the no mind state, right? But that's a little beyond this video. Mainly what I want to look at is how we use truth as levers, right? Strategic levers to help people on that path, on that process, and how with the wrong application, even things that are well-intentioned and worked for others can actually backfire and make somebody's life worse, right? These little pieces of wisdom. Now, how does this relate to complex chronic health conditions? Well, think about, instead of scrolls on a shelf, it's supplements or any other advice or exercise or specific herbs, which, by the way, I love herbs. I'm a clinical herbalist, right? But I'm the first one to tell you that sometimes herbs are poison if it's used for the wrong person, right? Just like the spiritual advice, these little spiritual lies, right? They can hurt people. If somebody's already off balanced, you push them, keep pushing them that way. You keep off balancing them. You don't bring them back, right? It's the same thing with herbs, supplements, any other medicines. And when we have this kind of worldview where, hello, what's your diagnosis, please? Oh yes, here it is. It's fibromyalgia or it's Lyme disease, right? Oh, okay. Well, then your treatment follows and it's just very stamped out thing, right? What you're getting is it's not personalized, it's not customized. And now you're going to have something that did work for other people, right? Even with some of these studies, we had an 80% success rate. Fantastic. What about the other 20% of people? What's going on there, right? This is obviously not universal. So there's something going on. We have to meet people where they are and balance them in a way that's right for them, not just right because that's what worked for the majority of people. And this is where we find a whole hidden layer of frustration if you're trying to heal, right? If you're working your way through, you're struggling with these health conditions, you got like brain fog and exhaustion, chronic pains, right? There's all kinds of stuff going on. Probably not sleeping that well. Digestive issues are really common. Libido changes, hormonal problems, right? There's a lot of this. Retaining fluids, reacting to everything, like your immune system's just going crazy, right? If you're dealing with a lot of this stuff and you're trying to get better, right? And you're trying to heal yourself, you don't want to get overwhelmed. You don't want to ask in a forum for advice. Hey, what works for Lyme disease or what works for brain fog? And then get overwhelmed with 100, 200 different answers that are all well-intentioned, but all possibly could hurt you because they're not aligned to you specifically, right? And this is what we call reasoning by analogy. It's the more technical name for this, where you just try to copy what works for others. And there's some safety there. We tend to think like that evolutionarily, when we're in a group, it's like there's safety in numbers and kind of go with the group. And so oftentimes we'll ask people in similar situations what works for them, which is great. It's a great first start. But what happens, and not a lot of people are talking about this, but what happens is if you try those things and they don't work for you, there's this weird little secondary voice that goes, oh man, the thing that worked for them didn't work for me. There must really be something wrong with me, right? Am I that messed up? Am I that broken that what helped that broken person didn't even help me? I must be really bad. There's something wrong. And it's like this whole spiral can happen, right? Not for everybody, but it's common. And nobody's talking about this, right? But you spiral down and you go, something's really wrong with me, right? Not necessarily. I'm here to actually take that like monkey off your back, because just because something worked for person A and didn't work for you doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that you're in a different situation than person A, right? You're coming in with a different set of off balance. You're off balance in a different way. Just like telling somebody who's already neglecting their own self-care because they take care of other people and then giving them this broad advice, consider others more, give more, right? It's counter, right? It's poison. The person already has that covered. They need other places. Same thing with your body. Maybe you're going after something. You heard a spiritual lie about complex chronic health conditions. All disease begins in the gut, right? People are saying this now. I don't know why my colleagues, we don't need to get on this bandwagon and oversimplify everything. And I know a lot of practitioners listen to these videos too. So let me digress for a second, but health practitioners, right? Stop trying to oversimplify it. There are multiple causes. Whenever we say, I'm going to get to the root cause, there's more than one root. These are complex systems. The root cause isn't isolated anywhere. It's in the whole body. It's the sum of the sum is greater than the individual parts put together, right? Whatever that saying is, you got to understand that complex systems, that's a feature, right? That's just how they work. They become something else. So you can't just reduce it down to one little piece and go, even with the best holistic intentions, go, well, all disease comes from the gut imbalance. No, the gut may be involved in most disease, right? But that doesn't mean it's the cause of all disease. Absolutely not. Because what about issues that are entirely from stress? What about when people have stress and the stress gives them headaches and the stress also happens to affect their digestion and now they have a gut imbalance? Sure. But maybe somebody's really susceptible to stress. Maybe it's because they had a rough, really rough childhood, right? A lot of trauma. And now when they get stressed, they have no threshold and they get real stressed, right? And that's actually where a lot of the symptoms are coming from. Does all disease begin in the gut? No, not that one, right? I mean, you can go around and around on this. Some people think, oh, it's all about the thyroid or it's all about the mitochondria. It's not all about any of those things. Those are all spiritual lies that are true sometimes, right? We get lucky with some cases, 80% of cases, right? Hey, we beat a placebo rate. Just because you get lucky there doesn't mean that that approach and that framework is actually going to apply to every single person. We have to be able to change our lenses based on the people in front of us. This is really important. So for the patients here, people who are working on getting their health back, getting their life back, you need to understand that your body systems, right, are the state of that in combination is going to determine what's going on with you. Your symptoms are signs that come from that. Your symptoms are ways that your body's trying to autocorrect itself or get you to pay attention and get you to start treating it a little differently. And I know it can be overwhelming. So when you say, hey, what worked for mold exposure? And people give you a bunch of recommendations, maybe somebody that it worked for, maybe they had a whole different deal going on. Maybe they didn't have much stage 3 nervous system issues. Maybe it was all just immune, right? But maybe you've got a different picture. Maybe your stage 3 is where a lot of your work is, right? So of course you're going to have a different response. You're off balance in different ways. As you learn, if you've been in my ecosystem at all here, you've probably seen me talking about stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. There's a bonus stage 5, right? Sometimes I whisper it, right? It's real, like not everybody gets there, not everybody needs it. Unfortunately, it's where most people start and it's supplementing and boosting, right? But really we need to clear out the excess, clear out the inflammatory processes, clear out the pathogens, clear out the biofilms, all this gunk in stage 1. It's the immune system. Stage 2 is digestion, where you start to get the bowel motility more regulated. You start to get a better balanced gut microbiome. You start to get a little bit of healing. You can tighten up the gap junctions and start to cause that leaky gut to relax itself a little bit. And now you don't, well, relax probably isn't the best word. It gets tighter, right? But the symptoms can relax. So you're not reacting to every single thing you eat. You're clearing that, right? Stage 3, neuroadrenals. We're clearing out old stress. You're developing a better stress response so you can start to live life without getting triggered by everything. Stage 4, blood circulation. We're clearing out those blockages. We're getting more basically blood roads put in your body so you can get blood to all the little cells that need it that have been starving for a long time, right? That's before you do any kind of boosting. You don't have to take a bunch of extra stuff usually if your system, you got to take the stick out of your spokes, right? Take your foot off the hose. You got to unblock your system before you start pushing more through it. This is like basic problem solving when you're a systems thinker, but we apply it to health. And now all the overwhelm's gone because you can start asking for advice. You go, okay, well, I got my 250 suggestions from all the people on a Facebook forum or wherever, right? And now you can start organizing and going, okay, well, these 30 are immune. This 150 all have to do with stress. This 20 is about the gut, right? And you can start to organize and you can go, hey, based on me, based on my presentation and where I have the most agitation in my body systems, I think I should probably be looking at this pile first, whatever that may be. You can start to organize the advice you're getting, right? This will set you free in terms of trying to figure out how to help yourself, because otherwise you're really just grasping it. We call them silver bullets, right? You're just grasping it like silver bullet after silver bullet. And again, the more times that fails, the more the morale goes down and the more hopeless we can feel, which is, it's an illusion, right? I'm here to tell you, you have hope, right? But I'm giving you an off-balancing, right? Well-intentioned spiritual truth, right? Truth, right? You do have hope, okay? Sometimes people's hopes are too high and they need to get a dose of reality, right? And you say, well, interestingly, here's what it's going to take to get those goals. Are you prepared to do that, right? There's a lot of things that we can do that are balancing, even the statement that all statements are relative, right? All these spiritual truths are relative. Even that statement is medicinal, right? Because it's something you say to somebody who thinks that all these spiritual truths are just truths. There's a lot of paradox and a lot of nuance here. I know I've talked about a lot of things. You probably have to watch this video a couple times. But the main point, if you remember nothing else, is that with the right plan, you can organize your treatment for yourself. You can start to strategize about what you want to do, in what order, without getting overwhelmed, and without relying on spiritual truths or recommendations that worked for other people that will not help your specific situation. Because we have to get clear on what's your specific situation. And then the treatment itself or what path you want to take, it starts to open up for you. The right thing to do starts to become the next obvious choice. So if you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, I invite you to join our group. We've got a chat group. We're off of big tech. I can talk about anything I like in there without getting censored, which is fantastic. You can ask me anything. I'll give you my perspective. It's free to join as a guest. There's a link for the application in the description here. And If I see your application and it looks really good, like you'd be a great fit with our community, then I'll let you know as soon as I can. I keep it small, I keep it cozy. We tend to fill up. The wait, it might be a month, it might be 2 months. I don't know. It might be a little while, but I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. Just know that I'm not making people wait on purpose. It's just that I like to keep the group cozy so I know who I'm speaking to. And when I give recommendations, it can be very thoughtful. So your application is an opportunity for me to really get to know you. It's a lovely place, positive people. We got a vault full of videos. You can ask me anything. It's probably the next logical step for you if you're really interested in taking back your health. All right, I hope this video helps you. Let's get you feeling better. Cheers.